What happens when the man who built the company from scratch gets behind the wheel and realizes his own drivers are scared of getting paid late? Quinn Daniels had built his taxi company from a single rusted-out Dodge minivan running airport pickups 15 years ago. Now his name sat behind 19 different taxi branches across the Midwest, and his fleet had grown to hundreds of drivers. But success had come at a cost. He hardly recognized the company anymore. He spent more time in boardrooms than garages, more time reviewing financial summaries than talking to drivers. Lately, something had been gnawing at him. The numbers were fine, profits steady, calls consistent. But the complaints were increasing: slow reimbursements, drivers quitting mid-shift, and one note that stuck out in particular. Branch 11 treats drivers like they're disposable. Quinn didn't like second-hand answers. So he booked a one-way ticket to Indianapolis, rented a cheap motel room, and spent 2 days designing his disguise. A shaggy salt and pepper beard, fake crow's feet under his eyes, a faded baseball cap, and a slightly hunched posture. He added 10 pounds to his frame with a layer hoodie under a padded jacket and wore thick-rimmed glasses with no prescription. To drivers, he'd be Ray, a new transfer from a now-closed Ohio branch. And since he'd never personally met most of the drivers or managers, something he now regretted, no one would recognize him. Branch 11 was run by a man named Dennis, the longest-standing branch manager in the company. Dennis had been there since the business expanded past 3 locations. On paper, he was solid numbers, always up, high ride volume, low complaints. But Quinn had a gut feeling something was off. He walked into the branch at 6:45 in the morning, the garage still dim and reeking of oil and yesterday's coffee. A group of drivers gathered by the dispatch desk. A tall woman with tired eyes handed out keys. Dennis wasn't there yet. "You Ray?" the woman asked, not looking up from the clipboard. "Yeah, from Toledo," Quinn said, voice a little raspier than usual. "You're late. You should have been here by 6:30. Grab keys from hook 13. And don't be late again. Dennis doesn't play around with new folks." She turned away before he could say more. Quinn took the keys and found his cab, an older model Crown Vic with a cracked phone mount and a lingering smell of fast food. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment, watching the others pull out one by one. His first ride came in by 7:30. A single mom with a toddler heading to daycare before her shift downtown. She was polite, paid in cash, tipped generously. The second was a nurse coming off a 12-hour shift. Both told him the same thing in different words: "Hope you get paid on time." Dennis is a nightmare with paychecks. By noon, Quinn had heard the same warning from 5 separate passengers and 2 drivers on the radio. At 1:30, he finally got a break and returned to the branch to gas up. Dennis had arrived. Dennis was in his 50s, stocky, bald with a thick mustache and a voice that carried through the concrete walls. He stood near the back office, yelling at a driver. "You get paid when I say. You didn't bring in enough this week, so don't act like you're owed anything yet," Dennis barked. "I've got rent due, man," the driver, a younger guy named Luis, said quietly. "I worked close to 60 hours, Dennis cut him off. "You want to talk back? I can pull your shifts for the next 3 days. You got something better to do." Quinn stopped in his tracks behind one of the fuel pumps. He wasn't expecting this. Not like this. Luis turned and walked out without another word. Quinn followed him outside and caught up near the vending machine. "You all right?" Quinn asked. Luis looked at him, hesitant. "You knew?"
"Yeah.
Just started today." Luis shook his head. "Don't say anything. Just keep your head down. You want your pay on time? Make sure Dennis likes you.
Don't complain.
Don't ask questions." Quinn frowned. "That doesn't sound right." Luis let out a short, bitter laugh. "It's not. But nobody cares. You think corporate gives a damn?" Quinn stared at him for a long second, then nodded slowly. "What about the other drivers?" "Same boat. Some of us get paid late every week. Dennis says it's performance-based. But he doesn't tell you that when you sign on, you got kids, you're screwed. Quinn didn't know what to say. He'd written the original driver contract himself. Payments were supposed to be weekly, no exceptions. Performance-based incentives were bonuses, not used to delay regular pay. He finished his shift in silence, picking up 3 more passengers before closing out around 8. He returned the cab, logged his miles, and walked back to the motel. That night, Quinn sat on the motel bed, staring at the stained ceiling, a lukewarm coffee in his hand. He felt sick. He'd built this company to give people jobs, to give people dignity. Now, under his name, someone was using fear to control paychecks? He needed to see more. He couldn't confront Dennis yet. If he did, it would all fall apart. He had to understand the full scope. So he decided to stay on for a few more days. Blend in. Earn trust. Watch everything. He wanted to see what else Dennis was hiding and who was still standing with integrity. He didn't know it yet, but the next 48 hours would shake everything he thought he knew about his own company. And when the time came to reveal who he really was, it wouldn't be in a boardroom. It would be face-to-face, in that same grimy garage. The next morning, Quinn arrived at Branch 11 an hour before his scheduled shift. The garage was still quiet, the only sound coming from a distant radio playing a local news station. He stood near the vending machine, sipping on cheap coffee from a paper cup, watching drivers trickle in. None of them looked rested. A man in his 40s with sunken eyes and a limp walked past him, nodded, and muttered that he'd been on back-to-back night shifts. Another, a woman with braids tucked under a beanie, was rubbing her temples and looking over a crumpled sheet of paper, likely her route log. Quinn offered a quiet morning, but she barely nodded. Inside, dispatch was already behind. A young woman named Jada was frantically flipping through trip sheets, trying to assign vehicles. She looked overworked, her headset slightly askew, voice hoarse from what must have been hours of nonstop calls. "Ray," she said, not looking up. "You're on car 21. Gas tank's low, but you'll have to fill up after your first run." "I got no time to reshuffle. How many cars are short today?"
Quinn asked.
She finally looked up, eyes red-rimmed.
5.
"We've got more calls than cabs," Dennis said to Stretch. Quinn didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. Outside, the lot was a mess. Broken glass near one of the stalls. Oil spills left uncleaned. One of the tires on a backup vehicle was completely bald. No one seemed to notice, or maybe they were just used to it. He found car 21, started the engine, and joined the morning rush. His first ride was a warehouse worker heading to the edge of town. They rode in silence, the man half asleep against the window. Quinn dropped him off and checked his tablet. No break scheduled. No time to refuel either. His next ride was already blinking on screen. By noon, he'd ferried 6 passengers and still hadn't had a chance to stop. The tank light came on. He radioed dispatch. "Dispatch, this is car 21. I'm running on empty. Need to refuel before the next pickup." Jada's voice came through, frazzled.
"Can't."
Dennis said no gas stops during surge hours. "You'll have to make it work." Quinn stared at the screen in disbelief. He pulled into a side street near a convenience store and shut off the engine, letting the silence settle around him. He tapped the steering wheel, thinking. This wasn't a one-off. This was policy. Fueling restrictions during peak hours? That was a risk to both drivers and passengers. He returned to the branch after the lunch window closed. The garage was louder now. Dennis's voice boomed from the office, and Quinn caught the tail end of a conversation as he passed. "I don't care if she's got a kid. If she can't work night shifts, she's not worth the space." Quinn paused. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Dennis sat with his feet on the desk, chewing sunflower seeds and flicking the shells into a plastic cup. Across from him sat a young woman in a zip-up jacket, clearly upset. "I've worked every weekend for 2 months," she said, her voice tight. I just need Wednesdays off. My daughter's starting therapy, and I'm the only one who can take her. You think anybody else here doesn't have problems? Dennis said, leaning back. This is a job, not a daycare. Quinn stepped back before he could be seen. He didn't know the woman's name, but he made a note. He'd seen enough to know how Dennis operated through pressure, guilt, and a complete disregard for anyone's circumstances. And people were too afraid to push back. Back in the lot, Luis was loading his car with a tired expression. Quinn approached him cautiously. You holding up? He asked. Luis looked around before answering. Barely. I picked up a weekend shift just to get my check cleared. Still nothing pending. You didn't get paid yet? Luis shook his head. Said I didn't hit ride minimums. But I checked did 39 rides last week. System says 36. Dennis says the GPS glitched, and it is what it is. Quinn felt something harden in his chest. You talked to HR? Luis gave a short laugh. You think HR listens to drivers? They send you back to Dennis. Circle closes. That night, Quinn didn't go straight to the motel. He drove past a few of the neighborhoods where his passengers lived. He saw one of the drivers, the woman with a crumpled route sheet, walking up 3 flights of stairs with groceries balanced on her hip. He saw Luis on a street corner, talking to someone and handing over a manila envelope, probably his rent, judging by the way he clutched it. He returned to the branch early, the next day an hour before sunrise. Dennis's car was already in the lot. Inside, he could hear him on the phone. I don't care what the report says, those numbers were adjusted for overhead. If corporate asks, tell them payroll's been streamlined. Don't use the word delay. Quinn stepped away before the call ended. He waited outside by the vending machine, watching as Jada arrived, juggling her keys, a thermos, and a stack of printed manifests. Hey, Quinn said as she passed. You work full-time? She gave him a blank look. Feels like triple time. How long have you been doing dispatch? Almost a year. Used to be a driver. Why'd you switch? Jada leaned against the wall, rubbing her shoulder. Got in a wreck. Rear-ended by a drunk passenger. Dennis said I could either take unpaid leave or handle dispatch. Thought it'd be better. It's not. You ever talk to anyone higher up? She laughed bitterly. You mean corporate? They only show up when the branch wins awards. Otherwise, we're invisible. A car pulled in suddenly, radio blasting, horn honking. A woman stepped out, yelling before the car even came to a stop. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. It was the woman from Dennis's office the previous day. She stormed into the garage, slammed her keys on the counter, and turned to Jada. He told me I was emotional. Said I should find a job that fits a single mom's limitations. Jada looked down. Several drivers glanced over, but said nothing. Quinn stepped forward. You quitting? The woman looked at him, startled. Who are you?
Ray.
Just a driver. She hesitated.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'd rather bag groceries than be talked to like I'm a burden. She left without another word. No one stopped her. Quinn walked into the office. Dennis was leaning over a spreadsheet. He didn't look up. What do you want? Just turning in my mileage log. Dennis waved him off. Put it on the desk. Quinn laid the paper down and stood still. You know, he said casually, I used to run my own little branch. Back in Ohio, we had a policy if someone needed leave for a kid's medical appointment, we worked around it. Dennis looked up, eyebrows raised. This isn't Ohio. We run tight here.
No time for sob stories.
Quinn smiled tightly. Noted. He walked out. That night, Quinn made a list.
Names.
Incidents. Patterns. He called an HR liaison he trusted, using a burner number. Gave them a quiet heads-up about what he'd seen. No names yet. Just a request. Pull the payroll records for Branch 11 for the past 6 months. Look for delays. Look for discrepancies between logged rides and paid rides. Then he sat on the edge of the motel bed, hands clasped. He couldn't reveal himself yet. Not until he had enough proof to act decisively. But he was close. And when it happened, it wouldn't just be Dennis who had to answer. It would be the system that allowed him to thrive unchecked. Quinn showed up the next morning with a plan. He'd spent most of the night on the phone with the HR liaison, digging deeper into payroll irregularities. The findings weren't just troubling, they were systematic. Dozens of drivers at Branch 11 had either been underpaid or paid late, and the discrepancies always seemed to benefit the branch's reported surplus. That surplus had been used to justify Dennis's quarterly bonuses. The liaison had also quietly confirmed that employee complaints about Dennis had been marked resolved without investigation, most of them closed by a corporate administrator who used to work under Dennis. That connection hadn't been disclosed. The deeper Quinn looked, the more it became clear. This wasn't just mismanagement. It was manipulation. But before he could act, he needed one more piece of clarity. He needed to see how Dennis handled pressure. Not just from employees, but from above. So Quinn made a call to a regional supervisor he'd known for years, someone who didn't know he was undercover. He asked her to visit Branch 11 under the pretense of an unannounced quality inspection. He wanted to see how Dennis behaved when he thought someone from the top was watching. She agreed to stop by that afternoon. Until then, Quinn worked his shift like any other driver. By mid-morning, he was paired with a temporary rideshare partner, an older driver named Armin, whose cab had broken down the night before. They were assigned a dual-fare pickup, something Dennis had recently implemented to maximize coverage during shortage hours. It meant 2 drivers in one car, alternating pickups with no extra pay. Armin looked irritated as he slid into the passenger seat. "This is nonsense," he said, tossing his hat onto the dashboard. "I've been driving solo 22 years. Now I've got to share a cab like a trainee?" Quinn drove in silence for a few blocks before replying. "You tell Dennis that?" "Told him yesterday. He said if I didn't like it, I could enjoy early retirement. I've got 2 kids in college. What am I supposed to do?" As they picked up their first fare, Armin sat stiffly, arms crossed. The passenger, a woman in scrubs, glanced between them. "Double driver day?" she asked. "New policy," Armin muttered. "Don't ask." When they returned to the branch at noon for a brief refueling window, Dennis stood near the service bay, clipboard in hand. He was reviewing something with the on-site mechanic, but paused when he saw Armin approach. "You done already?" Dennis asked, not looking up. "We need fuel," Armin said. "Car's running low." Dennis glanced at the clipboard. "You haven't hit the minimum quota. We've been running dual pickups. We can't take as many fares." "Then you're not working smart." "Not my problem." Quinn watched the exchange from behind the wheel. Armin stared at Dennis for a long second, jaw tight. "You know what?" Armin said finally. "Maybe it's time I do retire. But I'll be talking to someone higher than you before I go." Dennis raised an eyebrow. "You threatening me?" "No," Armin said. "Just giving you a heads up." Dennis turned to walk away. "Be my guest." At 2:15, the regional supervisor arrived. Her name was Celia Park, no-nonsense, late 30s, sharp as a razor. She wore a slate gray blazer and carried a tablet under her arm. As soon as she stepped inside, the energy in the garage shifted. Dispatch quieted. The drivers stood a little straighter. Even Dennis adjusted his tone. "Celia," he said, walking out to meet her. "Didn't know you were coming today." "Wasn't planned," Celia replied, scanning the room. "Just checking on a few branches. Thought I'd drop by." Quinn watched from the edge of the lot, cleaning the windshield of his cab. He didn't need to be involved, he just needed to observe. Celia moved through the building quickly, asking to see trip logs, maintenance reports, and dispatch schedules. Dennis stayed close, offering explanations before she could finish asking her questions. He guided her away from the locker area and toward his office, trying to keep the visit contained. But Celia wasn't easily corralled. By 3 o'clock, She'd already flagged inconsistencies in the trip logs. Several vehicles showed more hours than mileage allowed, suggesting either falsified entries or drivers being forced to clock in early without proper tracking. Your maintenance logs are also behind, she said. Vehicle 38 hasn't been inspected in over 90 days. Dennis rubbed his temple. Must have been missed by the mechanic. We've had some technical issues with the timestamping system. Celia looked up. It's a manual log. Quinn saw the corner of Dennis's mouth twitch. I'll talk to my team, Dennis said. We've been stretched thin lately. As Celia continued her rounds, Quinn slipped into the locker room to speak with a driver named Mia. She was soft-spoken, usually kept her head down, but Quinn had seen her working late, covering extra shifts when others called out. You've been here a while, he said, leaning against the wall. 3 years, she replied. You ever had issues getting paid? She hesitated.
Once.
Last year. I was short $200. Took me 3 weeks to get it back. Dennis said it was a system hold. That happened to anyone else?
Mia nodded.
It's happened to a lot of folks. But most don't fight it. They're scared if they speak up, they'll get pushed to night shifts or lose hours. Quinn nodded. You ever try going around Dennis? HR sent my complaint back down to him. He called me into the office and said I was damaging morale. After that, I stopped. He thanked her quietly and returned to the garage floor just as Celia was finishing her inspection. I'll be writing up a report, she told Dennis. You'll be hearing from us within 72 hours. Dennis forced a smile. Appreciate you coming by. She walked out without another word. Quinn waited until the sun had dipped low behind the lot's chain-link fence before making his move. He changed out of his work clothes in the back of his cab, putting on a pressed button-down shirt he kept folded under the seat. He wiped off the fake beard, pulled the glasses from his face, and stepped into the main office as the last of the drivers finished logging out for the day. Dennis was behind his desk, writing something into a ledger. You forget to clock out? He asked without looking. No, Quinn said flatly. I think you did. Dennis looked up confused. Then his expression changed. His mouth parted slightly, eyes narrowing. Wait. You're Quinn Daniels, he said. There was a long, brittle silence. Dennis stood. What the hell is this? I've been here for 5 days. Drove your broken cars.
Talked to your staff.
Watched how you treat people. I've seen enough. Dennis stepped from behind the desk. You can't just— I can, Quinn said. And I will. Effective immediately, you're no longer employed by this company. You're firing me? For manipulating payroll. For retaliating against complaints. For endangering both drivers and passengers. Yes. You're done. Dennis looked stunned. I've been with this company since, and that's the problem, Quinn cut in. You've been here too long without accountability. Dennis's face tightened, but he didn't say another word. He grabbed his coat and walked out. No one stopped him. Outside, a few drivers lingered near the vending machine, watching silently as Dennis climbed into his car and pulled away. Quinn turned to Jada, who stood frozen behind the dispatch desk. Let everyone know, he said. Branch 11 isn't going to be run that way anymore. The room stayed quiet, but something shifted. Shoulders relaxed. Eyes met his. And for the first time since he arrived, no one looked like they were waiting for the next blow. The following morning, the weight of change lingered thick in the air. Quinn arrived at Branch 11 just after sunrise this time, without the disguise, without the hunched shoulders or altered voice. He walked through the garage with quiet purpose, nodding to the few drivers already congregating near dispatch. Some stared, unsure of how to react. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Jada looked up from her desk, eyes bleary from another early shift. She stood slowly, unsure what to say. You still want this job? Quinn asked without preamble. She hesitated, then nodded.
Yes.
But not like this. Then let's fix it. He motioned for her to follow him into the meeting room adjacent to the office. It hadn't been used in months, dust still clung to the blinds, and the dry erase board on the wall showed faded reminders from a long-past holiday party. Quinn sat at the end of the table. Jada took a seat across from him, arms crossed tight over her chest. "You're not in trouble," he said, "but I need your help to get this place back on track." She let out a slow breath. "What do you want to know?" "I need names. Not just the people who've been mistreated, though. I'll need that too, but the ones holding this place together. The quiet ones. The ones who didn't walk out." Jada nodded once.
All right. Mia.
"She's the only reason we haven't lost half the schedule. She covers shifts no one wants, never complains. Armin, too, he's old school, but he trains new drivers on the fly. And Luis. He's got every reason to leave, but he's still here. I think he wants to believe it'll get better." Quinn leaned back in the chair. "And what about you?" Jada gave a tired laugh. "I'm just the voice that gets yelled at when the cabs are late. You're more than that. I've seen how you keep this place moving despite the mess." She didn't answer right away, but the slight shift in her posture said enough. By 8, Quinn had gathered the entire staff, drivers, dispatchers, mechanics in the main garage. The last time most of them had seen a corporate suit in person, it had been for a holiday bonus photo op. This was different. "Most of you know who I am now," Quinn began. "I started this company with one van and a busted radio. I've made mistakes, but I'm here now because I let this place get away from me." He looked out at the group. Some were still guarded. Others just looked exhausted. "I came here because the numbers didn't make sense. But what I saw went deeper, people working without support, getting paid late, being ignored. That ends today." A hand went up in the back. "Luis, what about the money we're still owed?" "You're getting it," Quinn said, without hesitation. "Every unpaid hour, every missing ride. We've already started the audit. You'll see it in your accounts by Friday." Another voice, Mia's, cut in. "And what about the schedule? We're stretched too thin. People can't keep working these hours." "We're hiring," Quinn said. "Temporary coverage first, then permanent roles. But I won't lie, it'll take a few weeks to stabilize. In the meantime, no one gets forced into double shifts. If you're covering extra, it's by choice and it comes with bonus pay." One of the mechanics, a wiry man with oil-streaked hands, stepped forward. "And the vehicles? Some of those cabs shouldn't be on the road. I've already called in an external inspection team. They'll be here tomorrow. Every vehicle that fails gets pulled. We'll rent replacements if we have to." The room was quiet for a beat. Then Armin stepped forward. "You really think you can fix this?" "No," Quinn said simply. "We can. Together." Later that day, Quinn met privately with the mechanic team. There were only 2 of them left, Tony and Brianna, trying to keep over 30 vehicles running. Tony looked skeptical. Brianna looked like she hadn't slept. "Why didn't anyone speak up?" Quinn asked, glancing at the cluttered parts shelf behind them. Tony shrugged. "Dennis didn't want us logging anything that would sideline a car. Said it was bad optics if the fleet looked under-maintained." "And you went along with it?" "I got a family. I didn't want to lose my job." Quinn nodded once. "You're not losing anything. But from now on, repairs don't wait. You flag it, it gets fixed or pulled off the lot. I'll bring in 2 more techs to help clear the backlog." Brianna finally spoke. "We're gonna need more than techs. We're low on parts. And the last order Dennis approved was 3 months ago. We've been patching tires with plugs and luck." "Put together a full inventory list," Quinn said. "Order what you need.
No shortcuts."
By midweek, a mobile HR unit had arrived to conduct one-on-one interviews. Jada was given a temporary assistant to help clear dispatch overflow. Quinn personally called each driver who had quit in the last 3 months. 5 agreed to return, provided the changes stuck. On Thursday, as promised, The back pay hit accounts. Luis walked into the garage holding a receipt on his phone and showed it to Armin, who gave a quiet nod.
No celebración.
Just quiet relief. That same day, Quinn pulled Mia aside during her break. "You've carried more than your share," he said. "And I didn't see it until now." She looked down at her sandwich. "I just didn't want anyone else to burn out. You deserve more than survival." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a promotion letter, assistant shift coordinator, with a salary bump and flexible hours. "You earned it," Quinn said. She looked up, eyes wide. "Really?"
Yeah.
"And you're not the only one." By Friday, the tone in the garage had shifted. The work was still hard. The days were still long. But something unspoken had changed.
People were speaking up.
Asking questions. Offering solutions. Quinn sat in the break room with Jada that afternoon, reviewing the first round of new hire applications. "You still think I can't fix this alone?" he asked. "I still think you shouldn't." He smiled. "Fair." They reviewed the stack in silence for a moment before Jada looked up. "You coming back?" "Not in disguise," Quinn said. "But yeah. I'll be checking in every month. Random visits. No heads up. If something's off, I want to hear it from you first." She nodded. "Good." That evening, as the last few drivers clocked out and the sun cut long shadows across the lot, Quinn walked out to the far edge of the garage, where a single cab sat idle. It was the same one he'd used on his first shift as Ray. He opened the door, slid into the seat, and just sat there, hands on the wheel, engine off. This wasn't about numbers anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. This was about people, about trust, about dignity, about making sure no one else ever had to wonder if their paycheck would come through, if their voice mattered, or if their job was worth the cost of their peace of mind. He looked out across the lot one last time, then stepped out of the cab and shut the door behind him. The keys stayed in his pocket.